It's a bit intimidating for me, I have to say, to be in a keynote jointly with Woody. So I'll just do my best. When we discussed with Woody, what is the theme that we want to emphasize in this keynote, we thought, democracy and participation in organization would be, given some of the topics that we've been discussing, an interesting theme. And to address that theme, I'd like you to look at this glass. If I show this glass to any French person, they would tell me with a bit of nostalgia, oh, my God, this is the glasses we used to have in my public schools in France, and we used to look at the bottom and figure out how old we were. So I'm telling you, I'm 25 today. So that's my age. And this is what is very specific about this glass. It doesn't break. And it's not only, iconic because it doesn't break, but it has also become iconic in a French context because it has come to embody and symbolize the promise of democracy in organizations in France. And I will tell you a little bit more why. Duralex, the company that builds this glass, was created back in the 1930s, but really took off after the Second World War in 1945, when Saint-Gobain, is a very large glass producer in France, decided to use the tempered glass technology that it used to produce windshields to drinking glasses. And that made a really big difference, and very quickly the glass Duralex glasses became ubiquitous in public schools, in hospitals, because they don't break. But they were also sold across the globe, maybe more for this idea of a French chic. They're still sold today in China and Japan, for instance, wrapped in silk paper, because they are, these very nice French glasses. But in the 70s, Saint-Gobain sold Duralex because they decided to focus on construction material only. And so Duralex was repurchased by, owners that focused only on short-term profit. And over years, the company faced very severe financial challenges because all of the owners were really eager to take the money, not investing neither in the in the industrial material nor in marketing. And so over the past 60 years, the company has experienced 5 bankruptcy filing, each time going to court. This is how it happens in France, going to court and having then to find another buyer that would settle the debts, cut costs, and purchase the company for cheaper, and then trying to make the company succeed again. And so last April, for the 6th time, the then owner of Duralex, called Pyrex, you may be familiar with Pyrex glasses, who had purchased Duralex 2 years ago, 2 years before. Again, Pyrex said, we need to file for bankruptcy again. And the company was meant to go to commercial court again. And then something different happened. The leader, the manager of the plant, the only plant that is currently remaining producing these Duralex glasses, together with a few unionized workers, said, if we once again, go out, look for owners that will once again, take the cash and, not invest in the company, the same, the same results will happen. So why not try to repurchase the company as a workers' cooperative? And to do so, they work to convince a coalition of actors around them, mobilizing local policy makers, from different political sides at the city and at the regional level. They mobilized banks. They mobilized, importantly, internally the workers, because the workers were important in that endeavor. And they were able to convince the court in Orléans to sell Duralex not to two other, for-profit purchasers who, also applied to buy Duralex, but to the Duralex employees. What it meant for Duralex is that there were at the time 230 employees, that the 230 jobs were maintained, whereas the two other potential owners were planning to cut on jobs. And out of these 230 owners, 160 decided to become shareholders. So this is really a real story, and that received a lot of coverage all across the media in France, because again, this iconic brand Duralex that everyone knows was trying to avoid the fate of yet a sixth, bankruptcy filing and another, potential cutting in jobs. So, we are with Duralex in a situation where, we see that, organizational democracy can win over extraction, value extraction, and it gives us a glimpse of hope in a broader context, which we know, these days is really highly challenging for democracy. Yuao yesterday reminded us that only 20% of the world population today is living in democratic context, when that number was, more than 50% back in the early years 2000. So, we are facing a difficult situation that reminds us how vital the work that each of us are doing today is. Most of us are studying either organizations that do fight for democracy because they, fight for minority rights, for freedom of speech, or we study organizations that are, in a way or another, practicing organizational democracy because they involve either their members or at times their employees or, at times other stakeholders in their governance. In the European context, we call this the social economy. One of the key characteristic of the social economy is this notion of organizational democracy. And we, hinted at the fact yesterday that, organizational democracy has, potential positive impact on organizations, but has broader spillover effects potentially on political democracy. As Tocqueville puts it, organizations can be schools of democracy. And so in a context where democracy is threatened all over the world, I think the work that we all do that in a way or another addresses this notion of strengthening organizational democracy has value and needs to be continued and potentially intensified. We have been taking democracy for granted, I mean political democracy for granted, and we now see that it is strongly challenged. We cannot take organizational democracy for granted either. And I will leverage some of the work that we are currently doing together with Julie Batilana and Romain Slitin, studying the transformation of Duralex from traditional for-profit company into a workers' cooperative, to share some of the insights, very early insights. We are still in the early data collection phase, but I thought I would nevertheless share with you some of this data to maybe hint at where are the challenges in building organizational democracy and find potential ways to address this. First, a first finding that we see is that what allowed the transformation of this, traditional organization into a workers' cooperative was the building of a very unusual coalition that span across, inside the organization, 3 different unions that usually spend more time, fighting against each other than really working together, mobilizing the employees who had no idea what a workers' cooperative was and who really had to learn about what this is. And there we saw the very important work of, one union leader being trained himself in what a workers' cooperative is and doing the educational work inside to ensure that he would generate buy-in from the workers' community to agree on moving in that direction. And then we also had a few of the leaders of the company doing more of a boundary work with the external world, convincing these political officials outside, leveraging the media to attract attention and put pressure on the court that ultimately made the decision. And so it's really this ability of building these bridges between internal actors and external actors that ultimately allowed the organization to successfully transform. But on September 1st, when the company was introduced as a workers' cooperative, what we also see is that while it was a workers' cooperative on paper, it was still working and operating in a very similar way than it used to operate in the past. And so a second quite intriguing finding that we start seeing is that even though today the Duralex employees officially own, at least 160 of them own Duralex and compose, 10 of them compose the board of Duralex, who is overseeing all operations. Turning this formal power into actual influence has proven quite challenging. And we've met the employees and on the board, and they struggle. They are blue-collar workers. They've been in the company for a very long time, but it's very different from running logistics on the factory floor, from sitting on the board and interacting with the CEO. And what we also see is that for the leaders, the executives in the organization, taking into account this new voice that is there, that they really called for, but not that they need to work with, is also not a given. And there's a few obstacles that we see that range from lingering distrust, although all of them are in this same boat and really fighting for the survival of the company. It's difficult still for the workers to look at the executives in a way that is not oppositional, and it's also difficult for the leaders to really take into account seriously the voice of the employees. Another key challenge here is informational. Leading a company with workers, participating in strategic decisions required managerial literacy. And that, for now, the workers do not yet have. And so they're undergoing a training process whereby, they're starting to learn what does it mean to be a board member, how do I look at this data that I'm, presented with, what are the questions that I need to ask, what is exactly my role and legitimacy. All of that they're in the process of learning. But again, it doesn't come along directly from just being transformed into a workers' cooperative. And then maybe finally, we're also seeing the company is still in a very tense financial situation, obviously. It's getting better. The sales have grown by 20% since the company was transformed into this cooperative. But still, we're talking about a major industrial company that burns, 4 million euros per month just for the production of the glass, the energy cost, the workers' cost, etc. And so while the transformation has for sure, and we have data on this, boosted responsibility of the workers who really feel like now this is my company, so I'm maybe less going to be bothered by the hours that I need to do. I'm going to be more cautious about making savings, etc. But they are overall under pressure, and making decisions as a cooperative takes time, which may not always be compatible with the emergency decisions that at times need to be made to ensure that the company manages at the end of the month to pay the salary and to pay the suppliers. And so there is also at times a risk that democracy becomes a luxury that the company cannot totally afford. And so we will try, as we continue, to follow them, and the goal for us is really to follow them over time if we can, would be then to look into under what condition can this economic tension be made compatible with the practice and the experience of democracy. And so what I would like to maybe conclude with is that it's not only a story of a factory in France. It is more broadly a question of how can we strengthen democracy in society by understanding better how we can encourage, foster, nurture democracy in organizations. And I believe that for a community like ours, this is certainly a great opportunity for us to go deeper in that direction. I'll stop here, but I'll be very happy to answer any question at the end. Thank you very much.